VeloBuild AeroTrace 368 in a size medium, and that includes pedals, power meter, bottle cage, out front computer mount, as well as these 65mm deep wheels coming in at exactly 8 kilograms all in. I told you guys thought this bike was gonna be super duper heavy, but I told you I would get this bike build to around 8 kilograms. So what that means is if you were to weigh this out the industry standard where you remove the power meter, which you really can't do, but if you remove the pedals, the bottle cage, the out front computer mount, this is actually more like 7.6 kilograms. So 7.6 kilograms for a completely aero build. VeloBuild. Yo, welcome back to the channel, boys and girls. Today is a beautiful fall day here in Chicago. We have 20 to 25 mile an hour cross headwinds, and surely this will be the perfect weather to test out this brand new VeloBuild 368 AeroTrace. This bike looks freaking insane. All right, anyway, let's talk about some of the components on this bad boy. Like I said in the introduction of this video, guys, we have this bike, as you see it, at exactly 8 kilograms all in. It's crazy what you can do with modern technology as far as getting a bike that looks this aero while being relatively lightweight. So how the heck did I get this bike so light relative to the overall shape and design of this bike? So the first and foremost thing, guys, we have these wheels here. These are courtesy of Peter over at XM Carbon Speed. These are 65mm deep, both rear or front and rear. We have internal width of like 26. External is like 34. We have Continental GP5000s in this 28 variant spec. And with these wheels come in at around 1,360 grams. So that is one of the ways that we were able to save weight while still going with super aero wheels. Moving on, let's talk about the group set. So we are rocking the current or latest SRAM Force E1 group set in a 1x configuration. This current generation of SRAM Force is lighter than the previous 2 generations, which of course means we have more weight savings there. And I've done a separate video on these levers, guys, but I really like what SRAM has done with the braking mechanism. It's fantastic, and the ergonomics are the GOAT. Moving on to the drivetrain, let's talk about some of the other ways that I was able to save weight. So we have this power meter Aero 1x chainring, of course, courtesy of SRAM. This is the current generation red version of the Aero chainring. We have a 52-tooth 1x Aero chainring. Of course, it's a spider-based power meter, which is really nice. The length on the crank arms is 170. And then moving out back, one of the other ways I was able to save weight has to do with this current generation of SRAM Force cassette. It's significantly lighter than the previous generations of this cassette. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments down below, but this cassette is on the lighter side. Now, you're probably asking yourself, when the heck would I ever be running a 52-10 gearing? Probably never, but this is more or less for drivetrain efficiency, especially on the flats. So I don't doubt I'll ever need to be in that 52-10. But with that being said, there is one thing I do want to note, which I do believe is a design flaw from VeloBuild. So when I am in that 10-tooth cog down all the way at the bottom of the cassette, essentially the rear derailleur basically hits the bottom of the chainstay. Now this is a big deal, again, because like I said, I'll never be in that 10-tooth cog. However, it is just something that you need to know. And so what that means is I basically had to back out of the B limit screw. And so what that means is because I had to back out or loosen up that B limit screw in order to clear the chainstay, that means the quality of shifting is okay. It's not optimal, it could be better, but unfortunately I can't really do anything about it because the rear derailleur is going to hit that chainstay when I am in that 10-tooth cog. All right, guys, we have more important pressing matters to discuss. So these wheels should look familiar because these were originally mine at one point. These are the Yolio C50 Pro wheels. And as you guys can see, we have it on this wickedly amazing looking Scott Foil RC. And Carlin is going to tell us about the specs. Shout out to OK Cycling. They're gonna kill me. Okay, all right. So
this is a Scott Foil RC30, and the only real downside of the RC30 is that the wheels kind of suck, so I have much nicer wheels on it now. But it's got 105 Di2, which is really perfect for me, and just a really nice aero bike that I've been loving for the past 2 years.
Lovely, lovely. So as you guys can see, I'm over here reviewing $600 frames, and then we have the lovely, luxurious Scott Foil RC30. Thank you, Carlin. Enjoy the rest of your ride. Make sure you
Thank
get that 65 miles in.
Got to do it. Almost done.
Wicked. Next up, let's talk about the cockpit. So this cockpit is also courtesy of Peter over at XM Carbon Speed. This is, I believe, his Avenger integrated cockpit. Obviously it's made of carbon and it works with the FSA system. So we have a stem of only 120 millimeters in length. And the reason why we've shortened the overall stem is because for me and my personal bike fit setup, I've noticed that the reach on the latest SRAM E1 levers are just a little bit longer, and I don't want to be too reached out on a bike like this. The width we have is 36 centimeters on the tops, and then in the hoods, they flare out to around 38 centimeters. Then moving on to the saddle, this is my favorite saddle. As you guys know, I've been saying it constantly on this channel. This is the Sella Italia SLR Boost in the S3 version, and the S3 signifies that this is 130 millimeters in width. Now, as far as frame sizing goes, if I haven't mentioned it already, this is a size medium. Basically, if you were to look at the geometry chart of this size compared to some of the modern Western frames, they're more or less the same. However, there is one aspect that I'm gonna show you a clip of right now, just to talk about how this bike overall effectively is a little bit shorter than I had planned before I ordered this particular size. A quick side-by-side comparison. We have my AeroTrace on the left, which is now completely built up, versus my Scott Foil RC Pro on the right. As I mentioned previously, the stem on the Scott Foil is completely slammed. So in order to get a 1-to-1 comparison as far as stack height goes, I'm running 35 millimeters of spacers on the AeroTrace. 10 millimeters of those spacers are recessed inside of that 3D printed bearing cover, but keep in mind that you pretty much for sure are going to have to run some sort of spacers at this particular size in my specific height. Now I'm 6 feet tall. My bottom bracket to saddle height is around 78 centimeters. So that would be a significant amount of a drop if I were to slam the stem. And truth be told, if you look closely, I could probably even lower the cockpit on the AeroTrace, probably another 5 mil to get it exactly 1-to-1 in terms of height with the Scott Foil. But just keep in mind, guys, that at my size and my height, you for sure are gonna have to run a few spacers on the AeroTrace. One more side-by-side comparison that I would like to note between these two bikes has to do with the effective top tube length. So on the AeroTrace, the effective top tube is actually about 12 millimeters shorter than on the Scott Foil RC Pro. And I kind of figured this out the hard way because when I was setting up my saddle fore and aft on the AeroTrace, now just for the record, my saddle setback is somewhere between 8.8 to 9 centimeters behind the bottom bracket center. But what I noticed is I had to keep basically pushing the saddle back. I basically had to move it all the way back on the saddle rails, and then I also had to move the entire saddle back on this fore and aft mechanism that you see right here. And I was trying to figure out, why am I having to push the saddle so far back, especially since the seat post angle on the AeroTrace is actually slacker than on the Scott Foil RC Pro. The Scott Foil is like 73 degrees versus on the AeroTrace it's 72. And then it hit me. The reason why I'm basically having to push the saddle all the way back has to do, again, guys, with that effective top tube length. So you can kind of see it a little bit here. So you see it, Scott Foil starts here, but then on the AeroTrace, it's actually like 12 millimeters forward. So just one other thing, guys, you will have to keep in mind when setting up this bike. It's been very interesting, but so far we have everything dialed in essentially 1-to-1. And because the overall top tube length is like 12 millimeters shorter than I had anticipated, because I did not look at that part of the geometry chart, I basically had to slam the saddle all the way back on this fore and aft mechanism. Now, of course, I could just move the saddle further back as well, but I don't really like to have most of the balance on the back of the saddle in relation to where the actual rail clamps are. So yeah, guys, kind of keep that in mind. Make sure you pay attention to that geometry chart because the overall length on the top tube is a little bit shorter than you might expect. Overall, as far as visually goes, I am really happy and thrilled with how this bike turned out. I have everything pretty much dialed in exactly how I wanted. I'm very comfortable on here. The saddle is not too high. The reach is not too long. I'm able to be in a very, very comfortable position. Something that I want because obviously with a bike like this, with this frame set, these wheels going one by, this bike, guys, is intended to go fast. This is not for your everyday long zone 2 rides, which of course you can do. This is really made to be an all-out, super duper fast racing machine. Now you see this white piece of tape here. Basically I have this here in order to test whether or not I'm getting any seat post slippage, which as you can see, I am. Now VeloBuild says that the torque spec on this should be like 5.2 or 5.6, which is absolutely ridiculous. I think I'm at like 8 or 9, and even with that I am still getting a little bit of seat post slippage. So I reckon I'm going to basically have to torque this to around 10 Newton meters. So if you do decide to purchase this frame, that is something to consider. Now the final thing I want to talk about before we take this bike out on the road has to do with the fit and finish on this VeloBuild AeroTrace frame set. Regarding threading the cables through the frame, as far as the bottom bracket goes, all of that was a-okay. There was no issues there. Inserting the bearings was nice and firm. They were tight. There was no loose headset play or anything like that. So everything in that regard is a-okay. However, the one area that I've been super frustrated with lately has to do with the facing on the caliper mounts, or basically the lack thereof of facing on the caliper mounts. Similar to my Tan X68, the facing on the caliper mounts here, they're not that good. They are better than the Tan X68, but not by much. And so I didn't feel like having to sand down those mounts just because we are at the end of the season. So it is rather annoying. Now I was able to mostly remove most of the disc rub, but I basically had to do some pretty creative methods when mounting the calipers in order to prevent the majority of disc rub. Basically I had to install a couple of washers between each caliper as well as the actual mounting points on the frame set. So keep that in mind. This is a $600 frame, so I don't expect it to be as good as the Western brands, but it is rather frustrating that because I am dealing with so many of these affordable budget frame sets that I'm always having to deal with disc rub because the mounts are faced poorly. Hey guys, a quick change of plans. So before I get into the riding dynamics of this bike, I decided at the last minute, basically the next day of filming, hey, I should slap on a set of Yolio Pro C60/C88 wheels, as well as throw on a set of Continental GP5000s in the 30C variant versus the 28 size. Reason why I did this is because I wanted to see what this bike would feel like with a deeper wheel in the rear, as well as going with wider tires. It definitely is more comfortable while still offering up some of the tangible aerodynamic benefits. Let's first talk about stiffness. The frame is stiff and rigid, but surprisingly not as punishing to the hands or lower back. There's just so much carbon in the frame, especially in the seat post, that it really soaks up all of the micro vibrations out on the road. Now, of course, moving to 30C tires helps a lot in this regard. Next up, let's talk about crosswind stability. Now, during constant crosswind or constant head crosswind, the bike is predictable and manageable with controlling the bike as a whole. You don't get blown around easily in bouts of wind because both the inertia from the deep wheels and overall weight of the entire bike keeps the bike propelling you forward. However, any sudden gusts of crosswinds can make the bike feel very sketchy very, very quickly. Now, this can happen when there's crazy winds blowing between the tall buildings downtown. So what this means is you won't want to use this bike for any breezy mountain descents, which I mean, this bike is not really intended for that at all. And finally, let's talk about acceleration and speed. Now, the frame is plenty stiff to potentially providing great acceleration, but at 8 kilograms with super deep wheels versus say 7 kilograms with mid-depth wheels, you can feel some of the sluggishness from the added weight when putting down the power out of the saddle. By no means is it a slog or a dog, but it is something you notice when compared to a Scott Foil RC Pro with 1250 gram wheels. So, fast group rides on the flats? No problem. 4-corner crits with minimal to no braking? Totally fine. In fact, one of the German crit teams won 2 of the 3 days at Tulsa Tough this year using a very, very similarly shaped aero frame as this Yolio and also paired with a set of 88mm deep wheels. But those boys are super duper strong. I am not. This bike is made for going steadily fast during solo efforts or even for TT races where you can't use an actual TT bike. But it's not for everyone. In fact, it's not for most people. If you're a sprinter or a puncher who can produce a lot of watts, or you're in a triathlon adjacent athlete who loves steady eddy endurance rides on the flats, then this frame is for you. But if you are a climber or you are one of the super lighter riders, then I would suggest you look elsewhere. So that is gonna wrap up today's video, guys. Once again, huge thank you to VeloBuild for sending me out this frame set. Of course, huge shout out to Peter over at XM Carbon Speed for sending me out the wheels, as well as the integrated cockpit. I'm actually pretty blown away with how this bike feels. Yes, it's stiff. Yes, it's rigid, but it's not as uncomfortable as you might expect. But of course, I will continue to test out this bike over the coming weeks. We are running out of time as far as content outdoor weather, but thankfully we still have just enough time for me to really put this bike through its paces. So questions, comments, and concerns, please feel free to leave them down below, and I will check you guys on the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.